Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Alyssa Warner. A City of Yakima employee accused of committing criminal acts and payroll fraud in the amount of tens of thousands of dollars, now formally charged with a felony after police say she broke into the home of another city employee and assaulted her last year. But a week after the city learned about those charges, she's still at work. It's an investigation by Apple Valley News Now's Emily Goodell that you will only see right here.
Jeannett Mora has worked as a full-time employee for the City of Yakima for more than 16 years. She was the police services manager up until last year when she transitioned into the role of public records officer. But it's that change and the reasons behind it that's left many questioning why she's still working at the city at all. When Mora was working in her position as police services manager, she was in charge of overseeing the entire police records division. That division was in charge of things like data reporting to the FBI. But in March 2023, rumors began circulating about Mora and her attendance on a regular basis. And that got back to Yakima Police Chief Matt Murray. Chief Murray launched an internal investigation and told her the findings on March 28, 2023.
The more I looked, the more I found.
Okay.
And after having looked at several months of data, including card readers, cameras, it's pretty apparent that you're not here much.
Yakima Police Patrolmen's Association Vice President Scott Grant, who spoke on behalf of the union, says he and the people he represents want answers.
It first started with essentially a 2-day investigation as to how much time Jeannette was actually spending at work.
Murray's investigation uncovered Mora was only coming to work about half the time, but logging her hours as if she were there full time.
I mean, just the few months that we calculated it, 50% of the time for a quarter of the year is at $150,000 a year. I mean, you do the math. I mean, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars that she basically stole from the city.
With department heads under pressure from the city to cut 10% of their budget, Chief Murray cut Mora's position and took it out of the police department's budget.
So it's clear to me that your position's not needed, because you're just not here.
Mora was put on paid administrative leave while she negotiated an agreement with the city. That agreement allowed her to cash out all of her paid time off, and in the meantime, she was hired as a city public records officer assigned to none other than police and fire public records.
That's one of the main concerns I have, is that she has access to a lot of sensitive documents and records.
How this happened is not quite clear, but it is important to note several sources have told me Mora has a close and personal relationship with the City of Yakima's Human Resources Director, Connie Mendoza. In one memo last fall, Chief Murray noted, quote, "Connie's clear bias toward Jeannett Mora prevented me from working through the most troubling employee issue I have faced as the Chief of Police for Yakima." Then, according to court documents in July of 2023, the Kennewick Police Department was called in to investigate Mora over allegations of abuse. And while those accusations were unfounded,
Jeannette was upset because her friends that currently work for the police department didn't tell her about the initial investigation.
According to court documents, on July 27th, Mora went to the home of another City of Yakima employee. Authorities claim she was intoxicated and had a gun. The employee and Mora struggled over the gun, according to court documents, and Mora assaulted the employee. That employee was able to get the gun away from Mora, and the Yakima County Sheriff's Office showed up and took her into custody.
But it was determined that there was no probable cause at that time.
Mora was briefly placed on paid administrative leave, and the case was sent again to the Kennewick Police Department to investigate. At the same time that detectives were working through the criminal investigation, there was a dispute between the Yakima Police Department and Human Resources Director Connie Mendoza over the records left behind on Mora's computer from when she was the police services manager. Per department policy, when Mora left that position, all the files on her computer were copied over to a flash drive, so the person taking over her duties could use them.
And it's actually YPD policy or Yakima Police policy that those records don't get removed from the police department, just for sensitivity reasons.
But earlier in July, HR Director Mendoza reportedly took that flash drive from a YPD employee under threat of discipline and refused to give it back, leaving the police department without access to those records. In fact, it escalated to Chief Murray filing a formal complaint against the HR director on August 14th and requesting an internal investigation.
The document that came back was disfavorable to the human resource director, and essentially ordered her to turn those documents over to the police department.
But nearly 5 months later, Grant says it still hasn't happened. Former city manager Bob Harrison was fired at the beginning of the year by the newly elected city council, but he stayed on the job until the new interim city manager was sworn in Tuesday evening. That means Harrison was still in charge on Friday when those formal charges came in against Mora. Mora was charged with attempted residential burglary, fourth-degree assault with sexual motivation, reckless endangerment, and first-degree burglary, which is punishable by up to life in prison and or a $50,000 fine.
We were just hoping that once she was formally charged with the crimes, that they would have the evidence they needed, that they would actually take the steps to place her on admin leave and eventually remove her. But when it was apparently clear that they had knowledge that she was being charged and still didn't do anything, that's why we're talking now.
But as city spokesperson Randy Beeler confirmed, as of today, Mora is still at work and has not been placed on administrative leave.
I think my biggest question is, why is she so untouchable? Why is she being protected so much? I don't understand why she's being treated so differently than any other city employee is.
A feeling reiterated in Chief Murray's formal complaint against Mendoza, where he said, quote, "Numerous city employees, both inside and outside the police department, have approached me about the city's response to Jeannett Mora's behavior. Universally, they feel that this is a continuation of nearly a decade of favorable treatment of Jeannett by Connie. They believe the situation is inequitable, unjust, and that they would never be afforded the same treatment for similar behavior." Grant actually told me several stories about city employees both inside and outside of the police department who were accused of committing much smaller crimes but faced a much bigger response from the city.
There was a officer that we had that backed into a mailbox, and he tried to cover it up by falsifying his daily record that we turned in at the time.
Grant says that officer was later charged with hit and run, a misdemeanor.
He was placed on administrative leave and terminated because of his actions, whereas Jeannett had committed a felony crime, yet no actions are being taken by the city.
In another case, Grant says a city employee working as a janitor at the airport took a bottle of gin from a box of items that had been confiscated from passengers by the TSA.
That employee is currently on administrative leave pending termination for a quasi-theft of a product that was never going back to the original owner.
I was able to get some clarification on the city's policy on administrative leave from city spokesperson Randy Beeler.
There is no process under which the city automatically would place an employee on administrative leave simply because they have been charged with a crime. Employees have due process rights, just like everybody else does. If a city employee was charged with a crime, the city would look at that circumstance, investigate that circumstance, and then come to a conclusion about what action to take.
And specifically, when it comes to Mora's case,
once the city receives it, of course, the investigation report will be reviewed, and then if there are any additional actions that need to be taken, the city will do so.
But Grant says overall, when it comes to the city's response to Mora's actions, specifically from the HR director and former city manager,
I think of failure as more of an accidental type of action. I think that their cover-up or their actions to sweep it under the rug was very purposeful, and so I wouldn't say failure. I'd say it's more corruption than anything. The ideal resolution is that she be placed on immediate administrative leave pending the criminal investigation, and we would like a internal investigation to see if there's any city policies that were violated, and then her actually be held accountable for those policies.
I reached out to City of Yakima Mayor Patricia Byers, who says she wasn't aware of any of this until just this morning. She told me, quote, "If the information given to me was correct, I do find it troubling. In my personal opinion, if a city employee commits a violent crime, I would think that there would be an internal investigation and that the person would be placed on leave until the matter was settled." I also reached out to former city manager Bob Harrison, who had some additional information about this case. When I asked him him about the police records dispute between Chief Murray and Mendoza, he denied that there was an internal or external investigation into the matter and that they, quote, did a review and the result was that they needed a better understanding of whether an employee has access to their former records. When asked about the relationship between Mora and Mendoza, he said that Mendoza, quote, as HR director, has always performed her duties professionally and this is no different. He emphasized that Mora's position as police services manager was, quote, not eliminated as a result of discipline, but due to a reduction in force. He said he did learn of the charges against Mora on Friday and consulted with legal and HR, but no decisions were made, and it's now up to the new interim city manager, Dave Zabel. I also got in touch with Zabel, who told me, quote, as is our policy, the city is not going to comment on ongoing personnel issues. I haven't yet heard back from Mendoza, but this is a developing story, and we will have more information on our website, applevalleyNewsNow.com. Reporting from the Yakima newsroom, Emily Goodell, Apple Valley News Now.